What's up everyone? In this video, I'm breaking down my Russian Armour deck that took me from 800 to 1000 elo. I still play this deck at 1200 elo, but I also play others more often as a lot of players are expecting Russian Armour decks, and I've been trying to figure out all the playstyles that we have available. This deck has been my mainstay through most of that climb. It's built around fast, decisive armored pushes using mobility, strong frontline tanks, and coordinated support to break enemy lines. It's not an air superiority deck. You won't see swarms of fighters or strategic bombers. Instead, it leans into ground dominance with hard-hitting armor, elite infantry, and just enough AA to keep attack helicopters from farming your expensive tanks. If you enjoy playing aggressively, making sharp tactical decisions, and micromanaging some of the coolest tanks in the game, this deck is for you. This video is aimed at lower elo players, especially those who are struggling to build effective armor decks or feel like their current builds just aren't holding up. I'll help you understand not just what to take, but why we are taking it. I'll also be uploading full gameplay with commentary using this exact deck, so you can see how it performs in real matches and how to execute this playstyle effectively. And if you're more into air power, support heavy decks, or the US faction in general, don't worry, I'll be diving into those soon too. So if this helps you out, or you're on your own climb through the ranks, consider liking and subscribing. Let's jump into the video. Let's talk about the core philosophy behind this deck. This is not a glass cannon push build or a massive blob, and it's not about lone wolf super tanks. The goal here is layered, sustained pressure, using a combined arms force to punch through, hold ground, and keep the momentum. Your expensive tanks like the T14 Armada and T90M are strong, but they shouldn't be fighting alone. They work best when embedded in a wider formation of cheaper tanks that soak damage, create angles, and help clear threats. AA is non-negotiable. You need it in your main force at all times. This deck doesn't contest the skies directly with aircraft or long-range AA, so if you don't bring TOR or other AA support, attack helicopters are going to pick you apart. Another key element is spacing. Do not blob. You want your units spread out enough to avoid artillery and bombing runs, but still close enough to support each other and take advantage of opportunities that may come up in an engagement. Recon is what keeps your army alive. Without proper vision, you'll get flanked, or worse, waste your big hitters on bad targets. Keep recon vehicles or infantry ahead of your push and on the flanks. And finally, infantry and supply anchoring. As you move up, bring defensive infantry to secure strong points like forests or towns, and drop supply trucks behind your push. This gives you a safe zone to fall back, repair, and even bait enemies into overextending if they are winning an engagement and assume you are retreating without support. Play it right, and you create a force that's constantly moving forward, hard to kill, hard to stop, and always trading favorably, if not just winning engagements and taking points outright. Let's go over the critical units that make this deck work. These aren't optional really, they're the backbone of your strategy if you want to try this kind of deck, and if you're not using them effectively, the whole deck can fall apart. Firstly, the T14 Armada and T90M. These are your heavy hitters. The T14 and T90M are your main battle tanks. They're expensive, so they're not frontline brawlers on their own. Use them as the core of your armored spearhead. Lay it behind cheaper tanks that can absorb damage and open up flanks. Next is the T90M Rasvachik. This is your mobile recon workhorse. It's armored, it's fast, and it has optics good enough to keep eyes on the enemy whether you're attacking or defending. Place it on flanks, ahead of pushes, or at key sightlines to catch ambushes early, and at the end of the day, it is still a T90. It can still get in there with a tank engagement. Just keep in mind it does not have active protection, so its biggest threat is rolling right into an ATGM line of sight. It requires a bit of micro, but it provides really hard-hitting recon if used correctly. Moving on to our AA vehicle of choice, it's the TOR. This is your lifeline against helicopters. You don't have air superiority unless your teammates are bringing it. So if your TOR isn't in position, your tanks are going to get hunted very easily. Always embed one or two preferably, into your armored pushes and protect it like you would a high value tank. Because once this thing goes down, there's always an Apache, a Guardian, or some other attack helicopter that's nearby and ready to just unload missiles into your tank column. Moving on to infantry, you use a lot of general infantry in this deck, but the special ones to mention here are the Shturmovikis. These are your elite building clearers. If you're pushing into urban areas, Shturmoviki lets you clear out infantry and AT teams quickly. Use them to grab objectives or clear buildings for your next anchor point. The only backline asset unit that we are going to be mentioning as part of the critical section for this deck is the Koalitsiya. It's not just artillery. Koalitsiya is your smoke generator. Use it to blind entrenched ATGM positions, force enemy tanks to reposition, or cover your push. This deck does not have the support tools to bombard strong enemy positions, but well-placed smoke blinds them and allows you to clear the gap and get in there with your armor as well as your elite infantry. Lastly, for critical units is the Katran helicopter. Now, the Katran is situational, but it has its uses. Don't send missiles deep into enemy backlines. This deck can't reliably clear out SAM networks. Instead, use its cruise missiles to snipe elite tanks, infantry and forest, or hardened positions in support of your push. Think of it as precision firepower to tip the balance in the engagement. Master these units, and you'll be able to punch through most enemy lines, hold key positions, and trade efficiently across the map. Now, I would like to go very quickly through all of the units that I'm using in the deck, starting with the T90M Rasvachik. I go into a bit more detail on using this tank at other points, so I don't need to get too much into the detail of it now, but we run it with the optronics system and the default machine gun. Next up is the BRDMs. I have them on the default machine gun. I don't have the upgraded sensors, although I can really see there being a good argument for that, and it's something I'm going to be experimenting with a bit later. I definitely run the op armor and smoke. It's only 10 points, and it makes the unit just a little bit more annoying to deal with in the enemy backline. PDSS is my sniper replacement. These guys don't have sniper rifles, but they have 3 stealth, they have good vision, that's what I need. For the customization, you can choose whatever you want here, it doesn't really matter. Lastly, I have my Mushkaya Razvedka. I mostly use these guys to clear tree lines. If I can't do so with my Motostrelkis, if I can't do so with my Shturny Berettis, they do have 2.5 stealth, so if you're planning on just leaving the unit in that tree line to provide vision after they've cleared it, then that's the little niche that I tend to use this unit in. I have it traveling in the BT3F, same as my PDSS. I just like having this vehicle on the roster. It seats 14, so it can take multiple of our specialist squads to the front line in a single vehicle. It's just a little more point efficient to stack infantry into vehicles than to send each unit in its own vehicle. Next up is my manpad of choice in this deck, not much to say here. It is the PZRK Verba. I also run 3 of the Conquerors M. I definitely upgrade them because for 10 extra points, it's worth it to get that little bit of extra damage on it, especially because I don't use it that often. I don't mind spending 10 extra points for better penetration on it. The next unit is the Shturmovikis. I go a bit more into detail about how these guys are used. For the loadout, definitely take the Assault Shield loadout. You want those flashbangs to clear buildings, really lets them trade very effectively with other high-tier infantry, and costing 60, they are incredibly useful. The Shturny Berettis are my first generalist infantry on the list. They are really good. They are my preferred general infantry. They have a really good launcher, really good weapons. I used to run them with the grenade launcher in the past, but I since added a separate grenade launcher squad to the deck and have since changed them to the thermobaric loadout because I felt I just needed more infantry with launchers that could get into the fight and are a bit more generalist. The other generalist infantry we use are the Motostrelkis. They also have their solid stats, light machine guns, launchers. These are our workhorse infantry that we are usually sending into the sticky situations. Lastly, for our infantry, as mentioned, we have a grenade launcher squad, the AGS-40. I don't use it every single game, but once you've gotten a bit of practice with knowing what's really good positioning for a grenade launcher, they can be incredibly effective at holding objectives, especially against infantry and light vehicles. For vehicles in my infantry tab, I have 2 T-15 Barbaresses. I know some people would go for more. Personally, I don't go for more because I try to get out of the Barbarous and into my mainline MBTs as quickly as possible. I do still carry 2, I open with them, and I try to keep them alive throughout the entire game if possible. It's a good unit. Most would say too good of a unit, but I only bring 2 of them. Other than that, we bring more BT3Fs, as I mentioned in the Recon tab, and we bring the B10 Kurganits twice. Once with the Afghanet Active Protection, and we bring it once without. I use this quite often to insert my Shturmovikis into buildings, because by the time my Shturmovikis are rushing buildings, it's usually a little later into the game, and the tools to deal with the T-15 Barbarous is online. So you don't want to feed that vehicle unnecessarily, because it's performing quite well in your tank force. Because of that, I grab the B10s. I'm not as sad if they die. They still have pretty solid armor. They still have 4 times protection. And at the end of the day, all they need to do is get my Shturmovikis into the building. I also have BTR-80s. This is just because they are quick. They are very fast, very useful for bringing infantry into situations where they are most likely not going to get shot at while approaching. Vehicles I've covered quite well, but I'll just quickly show here the upgrades. I've got the T90M. Only upgrade I have on the T90M is the Arena. Arena is always good to have on your tanks. I don't have the additional armor because it is only side armor, and although it's only 15 points, I feel it's not worth it just for some extra side armor. The next MBT, which is my cheap MBT, is a T80 UM2. And obviously it has a T80 UM2 upgrade here. ECM is cheaper by 5 points, but the active protection is much better than the ECM. For 5 points, that's not worth the difference. And for a tank costing 250 to have the active protection is a very good deal. Lastly is obviously our Armada. For our Armada, I went ahead and I up-armored it. I also went ahead and I added the top attack missile. If I'm going to be spending that much on a tank, I might as well spend an extra 30 just for an extra couple of % of effectiveness. Although I will say the top attack missile is very effective if enemy vehicles have had their active protection used up by infantry or teammates or other vehicles. This top attack missile can do a lot of really solid damage, and it's definitely worth it in my opinion. My go-to support vehicle is the MTSM. It only costs 30, it carries 10,000. I think that is a very good deal. My AA of choice is the S300 V4. I have it upgraded to the 4 times missiles. 50 points for double the missiles, definitely worth it. As mentioned in other points, you don't use this that often. You're mostly playing armor, playing frontline, but sometimes you do just need to put out a long-range AA, and this is a pretty solid one. The Tor was also discussed. What's important that I would like to discuss a bit more here is that I do not upgrade it to the 16 missiles. The reason for that is at higher elo games, players will start to target your Tors however possible in order to destroy them, to leave your tanks vulnerable to attack helicopters. And at 200, I feel like it's just a bit too expensive to field 2 of them as early as possible. The ZSU-23, I only bring this in if I'm playing a Russia mirror match and none of my teammates are bringing anything that could potentially deal with a nuclear missile. And I will also bring it out if I have my S300 deployed, or worst case scenario, I've lost all of my Tors and this is the only option I've left for helicopters. But I generally try not to call it out whenever possible. I definitely have the radar upgrade on there. It makes it much more effective at dealing with cruise missiles. The Koalitsiya, as mentioned, it's our long-range RDPs, 4,200 range. It's really good. I have it running on the cluster rounds instead of the high explosive rounds or the extended range. I think the cluster is the best munition type for them. It helps a lot when dealing with backline assets, which is what I'm usually trying to target when I'm using this piece offensively. And extra 30 cost for an extra 300 range, I don't think is really worth it for this deck, because obviously we are here to play armor. Now the TOS 1A, I also have the TOS in here For games that get bogged down where my tanks just can't push and I have extra income and extra time to invest in other parts of the game, then there's usually a good opportunity to bring out a couple of these, start using them to soften enemy positions and micro them. I have them upgraded with the TOS1A here. I've not gotten to really use them as much as I'd like. I'm not entirely sold on this unit being added to the deck yet, but I'm going to keep it in here, experiment a bit more with it. So far, it has not been necessary because my tanks have been performing well enough that I don't end up in that bogged down situation. For our helicopters, we're using the Mi-38T. It's a cargo helicopter. We need a cargo helicopter to keep up with the supplies. And yeah, I feel like this one has performed well enough, so I haven't really looked into replacing it with anything else. Lastly, for our helicopters is the KA-52K Katran. As mentioned before, we run one of these with the cruise missiles to snipe frontline assets. You can change out the rockets to another rocket if you like. However, I don't think I've ever used the rockets on this helicopter in this deck because it's always hanging back, firing cruise missiles and rearming. Our last tab is our aircraft. Our go-to anti-aircraft fighter jet here is the MiG-29K. It's running 4 R-77 medium-range AA missiles and it's running 2 of the short-range missiles. The last unit and the last plane here is the Yak-38. Now, the Yak-38 is a bit of an odd inclusion and I kept wanting to remove it, but it has come in clutch in a couple of situations, honestly. It's running the 2x250 explosive as well as the 2x incendiary explosive. This thing is only for hitting infantry in buildings or in tree lines. It's rarely trading positively. It costs 195. You're usually not killing enough infantry to make it worth it. But if a single tree line that is just full of javelins and tows is stopping your tank push, then you can just commit the 200 points to the Yak. It probably won't kill the unit. It probably won't make it itself, but it will cause enough disruption and enough area denial that you will be able to push up with your vehicles. Even in a deck built around aggressive armored pushes, you need a plan B, and this deck gives you a couple of strong secondary options to turn the tide or pressure from a different angle. Firstly, the cheaper option would be to deep flank with BRDMs. These things are fast, cheap, and brutal. If you find a gap in the enemy's lines, you can sneak them into the back line and melt support vehicles, artillery, and even light tanks. They usually trade up, and even if they don't survive, they force your opponent to panic and divert resources away from the front. Just be smart about pathing and avoid pushing them into heavy armor or other positions you're seeing a lot of enemy helicopter traffic. This deck doesn't rely on artillery, but you do have access to a few solid pieces. When you need to slow the pace or break a stalemate, set up a light AA web, keep your Koalitsiya protected, and use artillery to chip away at dug-in positions. The real trick here is micro. Your tanks lock down the map, securing multiple sectors with their mobility, while your artillery slowly softens targets and punishes static defenses. This also gives you room to react. If the enemy commits to a push and fails, your armor is positioned to immediately counterattack. So even if your main push gets bogged down, this deck doesn't fall apart. You've got the tools to pressure the enemy from unexpected angles, stall, and then strike back hard when you get an opening to do so. Let's quickly break down how I open most games with this deck. The early game is all about setting the foundation, not rushing, not throwing away points, but building a force that can snowball into a strong, consistent push. First, I don't always pay the air tax. If nobody on your team brings planes, sending one jet solo into the opener is usually a waste. You just feed it to enemy AA or fighters. Only add a jet to your opening if your teammates are also bringing air and you've got some kind of coverage or numbers advantage. If I'm in a mirror match, Russia versus Russia, I'll bring a ZSU-23 early, especially if no one on my team grabs any anti-missile tech. That thing can save the game if someone is trying to drop a missile loaded with a tactical nuke on your spawn. Just keep your eyes open for a single missile traveling towards your spawn, pop in the radar, and you effectively wasted the opener of one of your enemies. With those scenarios out of the way, my standard opener is double Verba AA infantry in a T-15 Barbarous. I use them to cap a point near our spawn. I'm not trying to rush. I want time to get my tanks and AA in place safely. Manpads with a T15 gives good general coverage on land and air. Next, I usually bring a second T15, carrying either general purpose infantry or an ATGM squad if there's a good spot to lock down. You want to start building map presence and coverage, not committing to a full fight yet. After that, I focus on getting a few of the cheaper tanks out to screen and absorb early pressure, maybe do some probing on the enemy position. If I open with the ZSU, I'll delay the tour just a bit, but I never skip it entirely. You need the tour before the enemy helicopters show up and absolutely ruin your day. And I never field expensive tanks right away. I wait until I've got a safe anchor point set up with AA protection and a solid buffer of cheap armor. Once I've established that anchor, ideally near a forest or a village, I start planning my push, step by step. I move from one covered position to the next until I'm in range to pressure or take an enemy point with a larger assault. This deck doesn't reward rushing, it rewards planning, layering, and momentum. So that's the core of my Russian armor deck, an unstoppable armored force built for players climbing from the lower elo brackets who want to play aggressively but smart. If your armor decks have been underperforming or you're struggling to build around expensive tanks without falling apart, the setup gives you structure, momentum, and flexibility. We focus on layered pushes, supported armor, and forward anchors. I'll be uploading full gameplay soon with commentary so you can see how this deck actually performs. I'm also planning more guides for other factions and playstyles, including a really fun air-orientated US deck that has helped me climb in higher elo games. If this guide helped you out, or you've got your own spin on this kind of strategy, or you just want to complain about the T15 Barbarous, drop a comment below, and if you're climbing the ladder too, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield with a new approach to armor.